Hey friends, we are here in Acts chapter 15, and Acts chapter 15 is about two disagreements. The first one is the major one, and it touches on my favorite subject. That is the subject of soteriology, that is the study of salvation. If I'm ever in a conversation, and I love these conversations where I'm talking about theology with friends, I will always gravitate towards soteriology, because it's the most fun. So what happens is that Paul and Barnabas come to Antioch, and it says that they stayed for no small time. There's a lot of interesting understatement in this chapter. For no small time. And then they got into a disagreement with a bunch of Pharisees. And it said, and it was no small disagreement. So they get in this no small disagreement with the Pharisees. Now, Paul is a Pharisee, or at least he was. I don't know if he still considers himself a Pharisee. But the disagreement is, in order for them to be saved, and it uses that word, in order for them to be saved, they need to become circumcised first. Now, to most Jews, this would make perfect sense. You know, circumcision is what's called a covenant marker. And so they have this agreement with God, and that they are God's chosen people, and the sign of that covenant is circumcision. And so when it comes to these Gentiles, they're like, if they're going to be in this covenant with God, they're going to have to be circumcised. It's just the way it's supposed to be. But essentially it's saying, in order for you to become a Christian, you have to become a Jew first. So Paul and Barnabas are saying absolutely not. And so I guess they were in Antioch at the time. They were kind of overvoted, and they said, if you guys want to settle this, why don't you go back to the home base church, which is now in Jerusalem. You know, later on, Antioch will be the home base of Christianity. But for right now, they say, why don't you go to Jerusalem, talk to the apostles, and we'll settle this once and for all. So they go back, and they have another big discussion. And there's three major players that are basically arguing for the side that the Gentiles don't need to become Jews in order to become Christians. So what they do is, first Paul tells him what he thinks, and then Peter speaks up. And Peter says, you know, you guys know that God gave me that special vision and told me to go off to the Gentiles, and when I went there, God showed no distinction between the two. He said they were united in faith. And I think this is important. I'll say it now, but what they're saying is what makes you a Christian is not circumcision, it's not following the law, it's your faith. And I'll say this too, that if you're adding things to the faith for salvation, you shouldn't be. It's absolutely wrong. When I think of it, I often think of it as like an order of operations problem. I don't know to what level of math you have taken, but there's that order of operations you have, you know, PEMDAS, or please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. And if you go in the wrong order, the math will be totally wrong. Totally got sprayed by this mud puddle. But the order will be completely wrong if you do it in the wrong order. So you can't add anything to salvation, because salvation comes by faith first. And that's so important, because you don't want people thinking that they are saved because of the works that they've done. If that's true, or if you believe that's true, you're getting things wrong, because if you're saved by your own works, then why did Jesus die to begin with? He paid for something. He paid for your sins. So there's nothing you can do to earn that payment of your sins. The only thing you can do is put your faith in Jesus, that he may do it. So have a relationship with Jesus first. You will have a wrong relationship with Jesus. You will get a wrong answer to the equation if you put anything before faith in Jesus for your salvation. And when I say works, I'm not just saying, you know, I feel like when people say works, they often think that they mean you have to do good things and you have to not do bad things. But a lot of times it's talking about following like, you know, things like circumcision, you know, things that don't seem like works, but it is. That's what they mean by it. So there's a place that Paul writes later on in the book of Ephesians where he says, we are saved by faith. We're saved by grace, I should say. We're saved by grace through faith. And this not of works, lest any man should boast. You know, by boasting, he means like someone say, look, I'm going to heaven because I am such a good person. And what you really need to do is speak up and say, I am a horrible person, but God has saved me. So, it's important that a little sidebar, I'm getting a little bit away from the passage, but essentially James speaks up and says, look, it even said in the Old Testament, I forget exactly which prophet he's quoting here, but he said that people will come to the temple and they will be saved, Jews and Gentiles. And essentially what the argument he's saying is like that you don't need to become a Jew. You know, it's saying that the Gentiles are saved. And it's pretty clear here that James, this is James, the brother of Jesus, the half-brother of Jesus, that James he's kind of the head man here in the church in Jerusalem. And so he speaks up and everybody's like, well, that's the answer. You know, no more debate. You know, it was pretty cut and dry. Everybody's like, yeah, that's it. So they wrote a big letter. Half of this chapter is just the letter that they write to Antioch saying, you don't need to become a Jew to become a Gentile. You don't need to do these works. But we want you to stay away from sexual immorality, and we want you to observe dietary laws. Now, why does it say that? The reason is because when the church was meeting, they're meeting in the synagogues. And the Jews, they're not trying to make them non-Jews. God never asked them to be non-Jews. When you become a Christian, it's not like you stop being Jewish. And so they are still keeping their dietary laws. And they didn't want to offend. They wanted them, if they're meeting in the Jewish synagogue, then they should observe the customs of the Jewish people. So that's what he's saying. He's saying, so that you guys will get along, you should observe these so that you're not offending them, but you don't need to become a Jew in order to become a Christian. So after that, you know, they're delivering the letter and they bring it back to Antioch and everybody rejoices. They're really happy about this. And after that, Paul and Barnabas are like, we should go on another missionary journey. And so they start planning, and Barnabas says, I want to bring my cousin, John Mark. Now this is John Mark. He is the writer of the book, the Gospel according to Mark. And so what he says is, yeah, I want to bring him. And Paul says, I don't want John Mark to come, because on our last missionary journey, he went to us, you know, as far as Cyprus, and then when it came to going to, you know, mainland, what would be today, you know, Turkey, he just ditched on us. And I don't know, it doesn't say why Mark left, and I suppose it doesn't really matter, but it was enough that Paul felt like he was maybe a fair weather Christian. And it could be said that Paul is anything but, because in the last, maybe it was 2 chapters ago, Paul was essentially stoned to death, and then he was either almost dead or he died and then came back to life. But I think after you do that, you know, you could never be considered a fair weather Christian especially after once you got up, you go right back into the city that just stoned you. So that's Paul's take on this. And I think that Paul is really trying to add his convictions to John Mark. And I think John Mark probably could have, you know, been a little bit stronger in his faith. So either way, I think that it's good that it happened. You know, they went on 2 different missionary journeys. You know, God wins in the end. But the reason I'm bringing up the issue is that I think it's important to note that even in early Christianity, 2 very right-minded believers were disagreeing about things. And so that should be a little bit of an encouragement to us today, that, you know, if you have disagreement with people in the church, it's not that they don't have faith. It's not that their conversion is, you know, any different from yours. But when there's 2 people, you know, you're always going to have some sort of disagreement. So that was happening from the get-go. And what ended up happening was Paul and Barnabas went on 2 separate missionary journeys. And we know that John Mark, you know, the writer of the book of Mark, was no fair weather Christian. But maybe this was just a learning experience for him. Anyways, this was a great chapter. This is Acts chapter 15. And I hope you guys have a wonderful day. Bye.